I'm rocking the podcast just like Sarah Ray does. I'm rocking the podcast, except that she is talented. I'm rocking the podcast. I take no checks and face the facts. Some producer with computers might fix all my shitty tracks. Welcome to the Zachrilege cast. And
Welcome to the Zachrilege cast.
Oh, gosh. There we go. Welcome to the Zachrilege cast. It's only like 3 times ever I've actually gotten that to work the first time. So, yeah. Welcome to the show, Sarah Ray. Good to have you on. Just to let everybody know, I am really representing today. I got my Dragon's Milk shirt, and I got the regular and the reserve peanut butter chocolate because all my beers should be dessert.
There you go.
And yeah, exactly. And
you got some good ad revenue coming in on that?
Well, I don't know if they should.
They should.
I've given them enough. They should give a little back. It's all about giving back.
Well, I'm on a classic Captain and Coke tonight. That's my pod drink of choice.
People say, like, is Florida really the South? I'm like, well, you're drinking out of a jar, so yeah. And yes, I put the beer in the background. It's a long story about this whole office. Like, in theory, I'm going to paint it this weekend, but I'm actually in a different configuration than just 2 days ago. I recorded my last show, but I'm like, yeah, put beer in the background to show everybody, show what I'm all about. But we're going to find out what you're all about.
Well, but hold on. If you're putting things in the background to show what you're all about, then I'm not sure what my Bibles and my prayer candles.
Sarah Bible.
What does that?
Cool.
What does that say about me?
Is that the grouch? What are the candles?
Yeah.
Those...
So Oscar didn't come with this. This is a trophy that we won for our group for Adopt a Road cleanups. It's a little trash can. It's so cute. It has like a legit trash can lid and everything. So wow. we bought a little Oscar the Grouch to go inside. And then the candles are it's me and my wife Becca.
Okay, nice.
So
I have to get
if you need to, yeah, we need to get a Zach Saint prayer candle. Saint Zach. I think that'd be awesome.
Well, that's enough talking about me and my background. We want to talk about your own like superhero origin story.
Oh, gosh.
So you knew what you had. You volunteered for this. So yeah,
I did.
What's your own like personal like religious background?
So I grew up in a what I call like a vanilla Christian church. It was a first Christian church. And
first church
the
ever.
First, right?
That.
It's so silly. There's no second Christian churches. But I'm from a real small town in the middle of nowhere, Illinois. 1,400 people, a high school graduating class of 32. So like the kids that I went to kindergarten with are the kids I graduated with. Everybody knows everybody kind of town. No stoplights, 9 churches. So
Illinois is like one of the most underrated kind of empty states ever. Because I went to college, University of Missouri, and my parents live in Nashville. So I would drive between Columbia, Missouri and Nashville. And Illinois was like the most dead part of that drive. There was like one part where it was like 35 miles between exits. There was just literally nothing. It was like, I guess, southern Illinois. So, you know,
right.
It's like there's Chicago and then there's not much else.
Everything else.
A lot of America like that.
Yeah. And I grew up in central Illinois. So like our next nearest town was Decatur, like the town to go into town. Right. And I worked in radio there for a while, before I moved to Florida. But like, this place was, I like to say it's like corn, soybeans, and white people as far as the eye can see. Like there's no diversity. Everybody like the thing you hear about like the Mexicans are coming to take our gerbs or whatever. That's where I'm from. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I heard. And I'm like, how many people do you even know that are not like you? And we didn't. Nobody. There was no diversity at all. And so everybody went to church. There was, a handful. There was 9 churches. Oddly, pretty much all various Protestant variations. There wasn't Catholic wasn't a big thing there. It was all very Protestant. So that's sort of the environment that I grew up in. This sort of small town, close knit community, and then I moved out on my own, and I started going to a Church of God, which is like night and day to the church. The church that I grew up in was one of those, sit quietly and you wait till it's time for you to stand up and sing, page 235 out of the hymnal or whatever. And the Church of God is a throw your hands up in the air and shout when the Spirit moves you kind of place. So it was different.
Did the Spirit move you?
It did, and I responded to that. Like there's a lot of psychology to probably unpack in that. It was there that I got into the praise band and was playing guitar in the praise band, and that what ultimately led me out. The youth pastor was like, "Hey, listen, if you're going to be, up on stage and sort of representing, you're, people are going to look differently at you because you're up here playing guitar. We need to make sure that, your soul is right and that you're, following the right path." So we started doing a one-on-one Bible study together, and he had me going through and reading the chapter by chapter and writing down the truths and the promises, and which is essentially here are all the things the Bible claims. No evidentiary support, no it was just write down all of these claims. And the longer
an example like a truth would be there was water. Okay, water exists. I'm in here.
Yeah, it was just a claim. This is how the world operates, is the truth, and the promise is this is what God will do. So the more I read it, the less I believed it, and that's eventually what got me out, and I stopped going. And they did the whole love bombing thing where they call, every week. Sure did miss you on Sunday. Hope to see you again next week. Is anything okay? You okay? Is there anything we can do for you? All of that kind of stuff. And that was the last church I ever went to. That was it. That was the end. And then I was at atheist for a long, long time. I just didn't care. It didn't affect my life. So I didn't live as if there was or wasn't a God. I just went on with my life. I had bills to pay, got to do my job, got to pay the rent, And then when I started seeing the religious community attacking, once I came out and transitioned, and I saw the religious community really going after, marginalized groups, that's when I kind of got angry and started caring about religion again. But that's a super broad overview, and you're welcome to poke back at any of that.
So no love bombing when you transitioned?
So I had left the church by that point. And
how did you get to, what's the story of you getting from Illinois to Florida?
Yeah. So I was living on my own. I worked in talk radio for a while, and then I opened my own business doing computer repair and website design and that kind of stuff. And I was in my first marriage at the time, and we came down here to Florida on a Disney vacation. And it was all the things that it's supposed to be, right? It's the dream that Disney sells. And so we kind of came back from that trip thinking this is something that I want to be a part of. Just the way people are taken care of, and the way that cast members are sort of trained to connect with you and and create this experience. Like, wow, that would be something really cool to be a part of. So we did. We just packed our shit and moved down here. Like at that point, there really wasn't anything holding us in Illinois. So we just packed our stuff up and moved. Now, all of this is still pre-transition. I hadn't really dealt with any of that yet. I was, for a long time, I identified as a cross-dresser because in the late 90s, early 2000s, we didn't have language that we do today. Certainly, like, transsexual was still sort of the name du jour. And then transgender hadn't really taken off yet, and there was certainly not non-binary and gender fluid and all of that stuff that we can identify today. So I identified as a cross-dresser for a long, long time, and my first wife was aware of it and not necessarily supportive. She tolerated it to the extent of like, okay, well, if you want to dress up like a girl and around the house, that's okay, but like you're not going to go outside like this, right? So I did a lot of the trans sort of cycle of exploration and then packing it all away, throwing it all away, that sort of purge cycle where where the guilt and the shame like creeps back up and you decide like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this. This is wrong. So let me just throw all of this stuff, the clothes that I've thrown away over the years. Holy crap. Just because I had to get it away from me, like, because I can't be this person anymore. I have to, I have to be the man that society expects me to be or whatever. And then you go a couple months and realize, well, that was all bullshit. You can't just throw it away and turn it off. It doesn't work like that. And so I would go through those cycles. But we moved down here to work for Disney. I worked for Disney for almost 10 years. I almost made it to the 10-year mark.
So is this before Disney got woke? I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
Was it the op-ed that made a big splash over the weekend?
Yeah, they're finally coming around. I hired in under the 1942 era appearance guidelines, and I mean, like, it was very. I mean, you could look at it as even discriminatory or xenophobic, even like it was things like. You can't have visible tattoos, and men you can't have your hair over your ears or on your collar. Like it has to be kept a short, 1952, whatever hairstyle. Like
pre-Beatles, even like a long time ago, people.
Yep. Hairstyles were very, specifically regulated. And when you think about like people of color, those were considered extreme hairstyles, what are, of natural hairstyle. So that was a long fight too. Like the color of nail polish you can wear. And when I hired in, men still couldn't have beards either, or wear earrings. So they were trying to like recreate this wholesome, 1950s, whatever America that, that only exists in the pictures. And so finally, they've seemed to have gotten on board the woke wagon. But, so anyway, I worked for Disney for several years, and that's where I really found community in a way that like, oh, well, Orlando is like the gay Disney bubble down here. Well, you have all of the theme parks, which that's a lot of performers, that's a lot of entertainment, and the gay tends to skew real high when it comes to the entertainment industry. And so like there were just a lot of people here that were somewhere under the rainbow, and it was cool, it was okay, and everybody was fine with it. And so it became like more and more easy to be who I needed to be, who I knew I was, and had to hide all of this time. just by sort of being in a place that was more supportive of differences and different identities. And again, coming from like that Midwest corn, soybeans, and no diversity, it was just a completely different world. But had I not moved down here, I wouldn't be doing any of the things that I am right now. I wouldn't be living authentically. I wouldn't be advocating for atheist, secular values. None of that stuff. Had I not escaped.
You got to have a sip. I mean, it's important.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even think, like, I was like connecting the dots. I'm like, oh, you talked about Orlando being like a gay bubble. And I'm like, oh, that's where the Pulse shooting happened. Like,
right. Yeah.
I mean, so you're still in Orlando? That's because, like, Polk County, I was like, okay, we're in the Orlando, Tampa, Central kind of Florida area.
It's interesting. Where we're at now is a lot like where I came from. So we're like right between Orlando and Tampa. If you traverse Interstate 4 from Orlando to Tampa, we're like right in the middle. And then we're just this like big red blob of ruralty out here in the middle of nowhere. And so like it is very, very similar to where I grew up, like where you have Chicago and sort of all the things that come along with a city and population center, and then this rural area and all of the things that tend to come along with that. So where I live now is not too far cry from where I came from, but a whole lot closer to population than I used to be. It was 3 hours to get to Chicago from where I grew up.
Okay, so you're definitely closer to a city now.
Yeah.
Although Florida's a special place.
Isn't it?
It's got like, you got a lot. It's really weird. You think of like the South, and then you think of Florida as something totally different because there's so many people who have come there from other places. But it's almost become like a right-wing hotbed over time. But there are pockets.
It's interesting that
like
this
being in Georgia
place, if you like when you do the math and look at maps and stuff, we are like a really great example of what gerrymandering does. And like when you look at the things that are happening in our legislature this session, and has been going for years, it, like a lot of places in the country, it's not stuff that people widely support. Like this isn't the stuff that they're trying to pass is not super popular stuff. It's like right-wing red meat, play to the frothing at the mouth base stuff. And they get away with that now because the districts have been so gerrymandered that, you couldn't win a majority if you wanted to.
sounds like, yeah, a lot of the country. But how is I mean, I would assume your mental health is probably better, but how has your life changed now that you're trans and you're out? Also being married and having kids. Did you say 2 kids?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, that was a thing. So the transition story sort of, it was like 2015. And I can't remember the timing of when all of this, like the North Carolina bathroom bill happened, either right in the middle of this or right after. But I was in one of those cycles of like, I was coming out of the shame part of the cycle into the like, oh God, I still feel the way God damn it, I still feel this way. It didn't go away. I didn't hide it. It's back. So like, let me address it again. And I went to a therapist in Orlando, and like, this is what they specialize in. Right. And so after the very first session, the therapist was like, yep, you are classic textbook gender dysphoria. When would you like to start transitioning? And I was like, she's assuming that's what you want to do. And I was like, yeah, 15 years ago would be great. Can we do that? In a time machine somewhere?
The rewind, yeah.
So I came home from that appointment very excited. Now I'm into my second marriage, right? And my wife now is obviously super duper supportive and has been from jump. And we met in Fantasyland. Oh, we worked together in Fantasyland. So
A real place.
yeah. So I came home and was like so excited, like, yes, finally we're doing something about this. This is going to be great. And she was quiet for like a good day and a half. Didn't say a whole lot. And so eventually it came out. She was like, I don't know how this is going to work for me. Like, I'm not attracted to women. I want another kid. Like, there was a lot. And so we went back to therapy together, which I highly recommend. And we, through that session, the therapist addressed her concerns and questions, and she was on board. Like, from that moment, she was like, okay, yep, I get it. We're good. Like, and it was the idea that the person that you fell in love with doesn't drastically change just because they go through this process, right? Like, yes, the way the world perceives you is going to change. The way that the world sees you as a couple, appearances will change. Emotions will definitely change with hormones, but like the core of that person that you fell in love with doesn't change. So, did you fall in love with a penis or did you fall in love with a person, sort of thing? And then at that point, she was like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Cool. I get it. I want a baby first. So we had another kid. So we had our second. So we have, now they are 5 and 11, and 5 going on 15 and 11. Our daughter is just she's that like Jekyll and Hyde age where she can just be the sweetest little princess, or the meanest bitch you've ever met. So we're going through that. The youngest has only ever known me as Mommy S. So our son was 3 or 4, I want to say, when I transitioned. And we really tried to like make him part of that whole conversation. Like, in the beginning it was so much more about him than it was about me. So it was like, okay, we're going through this change, and daddy is going to be a girl now. How can we make this work for you? Like, how can we make this easy on you, like, and be part of this and not just like shock to your system? And so we did things like, you get to pick what you call me, because it's more, at that point, it's more about you than it is about me. So if you want to still call me daddy, whatever, like, right. That's not a big deal, in the grand scheme of things. Now, eventually that got to the point where it was super weird walking through Target or whatever and having your kid yell, daddy, daddy, and come running to you or whatever. And I didn't look like a daddy. So then I started taking on some self-conscious, like, out in public stuff. But we sat him down and had another conversation about, this is how it feels for me to be out in the world. Would you like to pick what you call, would you like to change what you call me? Would you like to make it up? Put the choice back in his hands. And he came up with Mommy S and Mommy B for Sarah and Becca. And from that moment, like, if you say some shit about trans people, now he will, like, he'll step in front of me to knock you down, because he doesn't take anybody's shit. He's become my number one fan, my number one supporter.
That's pretty cool. I mean, it's probably about the kind of relationship you have with your spouse, and then you have with your kids, to be able to kind of communicate. Because to think you marry somebody, and if you're together for a length of time, and you think you're going to be the same person on day one,
right?
There are going to be changes They're all going to be the same kind of changes. But what was it like? See, these are experiences I've never had, but what was it like to kind of have a second puberty and then to kind of like to have your own name, like to say, oh, this is what I want to be called now. Like, I feel like that has to be pretty empowering. I mean, it's probably scary too, but you know, there's an empowering side to it.
Yeah. The name thing was, it just always was. Like, I don't remember a moment of choosing, like, oh, this is what my name's going to be or whatever. Like, it wasn't a big deal. It's just like, for the longest time, I sort of lived with this alter ego, basically, that, you know, God, back in the day when, you know, we had forums, that, you know, the anonymity of the internet, and you were able to like go and just be this other person privately that you couldn't be in public. And I think like between, you know, that and like, oh, creating Sims characters or whatever, like all of that stuff probably like over time led me to this like identity name thing. But I don't remember there being a moment where I was like, oh yeah, Sarah, that's the name. Like, I don't recall there. And it's interesting because for a lot of people, it's a huge deal. Like, oh, I picked this name for a very specific reason. Like, you know, this was somebody who influenced my life, or a family member that I, you know, or I talked to my parents and asked, you know, like, oh, if I had been born a girl, did you have a name picked out for a girl? And I, you know, I'll use that name. Like, a lot of different people come to that a different way. What was the other part of the question? I forgot. I missed it.
Oh, like the whole like second puberty. I mean, you mentioned on your last episode about, and this was just in passing, about like the first time you kind of thought you were trans was like when you went through puberty, when you were you know, a teenager, and you know, obviously you went through it again a little bit later in life. So I was just wondering about that experience, because it's got to be like something I can't like. I'm just always interested to hear these stories. What is it like in reality when it actually happens, you know?
Right. I don't know if this is like my trauma brain or whatever, but where I have a really bad memory about lots of things. And so like, if you had said, what was it like going through puberty, other than the sort of incongruous nature of like, oh, my body's changing, but it doesn't feel right. Other than that, like, I couldn't really describe to you what puberty was like. Now that said, so then we go to the therapist, have all of those conversations. And then I went to see a doctor to get prescribed hormone replacement therapy. And some of that is so slow and that it doesn't really come as a like noticeable thing. If you were to ask my wife what that second puberty was like, I'm sure she would have some like, oh, she was a moody bitch or whatever, you know, I'm sure she would have some shit to say. But I didn't, because it was so gradual. I don't think I noticed it as much. I definitely like spent a lot of time in tears. Like, it definitely made me emotional. The change in hormones, like, and that was a relieving thing, because, you know, in living the male expectation in our society, you're not supposed to feel, you're not supposed to cry, you're not supposed to be weak or whatever, like this bullshit gender stereotype stuff. And so like, I was finally feeling for the first time, which was a huge thing. So that's a thing that I you know, recognize. Bodily changes were, you know, happened too. The later in life you do the thing, you know, sort of the less impact it has. Like, you know, for breast growth, you're going to get whatever you're going to get. A lot of that is genetic, determined. But the longer, the older you are when you go through the transition and at least medically with hormones, the sort of less of an impact it has. But yeah, other than that, like it was it was more emotional than it was physical.
Okay, well, I just kind of want to hear what your experience was, and here we are, 30 minutes in, and now it's time to start talking about your actual content. So you had that kind of radio background, and you were doing a show called Sarah Talks, but what led you to kind of get involved with Polk County Atheists? I don't know if that's something that you helped to get off the ground or if that was already an existing thing. So let me know.
Yeah, that was something that I helped launch. So, again, sort of in this growing momentum, when I started Sarah Talk, it was very much like the conversation we just had. Like, here's what it's like to go to the therapist and have those conversations. And here's what it's like, the first few months on hormones. And then here's what it's like to go to work and have to say, hey, so you don't have any trans people here, and your policy does not seem very trans affirming. So I don't know how this is going to go, but here's the thing you need to know about me. And like just how it was a very sort of personal journey podcast. And then you get to a point in transition, I think, where like then there's not a whole lot to talk about. Like from one week to the next, I go to work, I sleep a lot. Like I'm just living normal life like everybody else. There's not a lot to talk about. I go see my doctor once a year now. Like it's not exciting. There's not a lot of things to talk about. So, so about that time, North Carolina passed their House Bill 2 bathroom ban. And then Texas came shortly after that with their own version. And so we were starting to like talk about things in the news more. And that's when it really sort of like became this activist-y thing, less than the personal experience thing. And so we were talking about things in the news that were, pissing us off. And it turned out like every time there's an attack on my community, guess where it's coming from? Religion. And so that kind of sparked my angry atheist phase, which I'd like to think didn't last very long. Don't get trapped in that phase. Like, it's good to be angry. We have stuff to get done, but like, we need to take that energy into something more productive than just being a dick on the internet. So, so that I know, right? So that's a lot of what a lot of what we do with our local organization is to try to encourage that like positive engagement in the community. But we were going to the Central Florida Free Thought community is an Orlando area group, and they have like a really good speaker series, David and Jocelyn, where they, once a month they have a speaker come in, and it's, all of this pre-COVID, of course, but it's generally a really good sized crowd. They had a few people come in that, little, maybe more recognizable names. And so we started going to their monthly speaker sessions when it was somebody we wanted to hear. And from here, that's an hour drive. So that's okay for like once a month, we're going to go see somebody speak. But that's not sustainable for like, we want to go have coffee with you guys, once a week, or we're going to go do your park cleanup, or like to really be more involved. Driving an hour to get there and an hour back that's just not going to work. And so then the next closest groups were in Tampa, and that's an hour drive in the other direction. So, and we have kids. So wherever we go, the kids have to go. Mm-hmm. And so we just, after complaining about that a lot, my wife finally said, when are you going to stop bitching about it and do something about it? And so we did. We started the atheist community of Polk County. Polk County is the 4th or 5th largest county by area, depending on whether you count the water or not. And so geographically, we're spread out. We're a big county. And I want to say there's like, I don't know, 13, 15, 18 something communities in the county. And there wasn't anything here. There was a like Skeptics at the Pub sort of meetup group. They weren't very active. We met with them early on just to say like, hey, listen, I got big dreams. But I also don't want to like step on your toes if you guys are trying to launch a thing. Like, let's work together if we can. And anyway, the short of that is that we launched the atheist community of Polk County, and a lot of people found us, and it's been great. We've been growing and doing all kinds of stuff. But to the point of like really trying to help people into that productive space. If you look at like a lot of the organizations and the work that's being done at national levels, even like recovering from religion, right? There's an idea that people have been harmed. Many people have been harmed by a religious upbringing, and because of our culture in America of not getting treatment for things, largely because it's a $60 copay for me, and I have great insurance just to go see a therapist. We don't address it. We don't deal with it. And so people are carrying around this baggage. They don't realize how it's affecting their lives. And I contend that like I said, like being a dick on the internet it's not helping. It's not helping you. It's not helping us. It's not helping the movement. Like religion carves this hole and says, this is what an atheist is. And we're trying to say, no, we're not. Like, that's not who we are. We're good people. We're your neighbors. We are hardworking, if that's a thing you value. Like we're not monsters. So don't go out and be a monster and prove them right. Like, let's go do good things. And so a lot of what we organized around, first of all, we got a great team on the board that are just really interested in helping people. And so we do all kinds of like community service stuff around food insecurity, working with homeless populations and students in public schools who leave school on Friday and their last meal is lunch at school on Friday, and their next meal is breakfast at school on Monday. So we said we wanted to carve out a space here where we can do good and make a difference. And while we're doing that, like we want to change the perception that people have about what an atheist is, that we aren't these, awful heathen monsters. Now we could have easily like picked the humanist label and, softened it up a little bit from the start. But we thought it was important to reclaim the atheist label. Like all it says is, I don't believe in your gods. It doesn't say anything else. It's not a moral justification or whatever. Like, so that's what we really set out to do here. And it's been really successful. We started it 3 years ago now. And we're kicking ass down here.
Well, how's it been? Does it seem like this kind of group is even more necessary during COVID times? I mean, maybe not for the in-person stuff, but to be able to support, because there are more people in need now than there have been before.
Right. It's interesting. We've done a lot of talking about like, what did things look like post-COVID and how did that change? And then how are we going to keep that or change it going forward? So yeah, like we haven't been doing a lot of in-person stuff. The stuff that we do now is, mostly outdoors or whatnot. And small groups that we can, maintain distancing to do that sort of stuff. But yeah, like we really launched into this response to a humanitarian need in the wake of COVID. We helped start a food pantry that like delivers boxes of groceries to people instead of asking them to come to us. One, because a lot of them we knew were COVID positive, and we don't want you to come bring that to us. Like, we'll set a box outside your door and knock. Think if that's all right with you, you know, like. But there are a lot of people that can't get to a food pantry, even though they bring a truck in. These mobile food pantries, they like drive a truck in on a Wednesday every week or whatever, or once a month, and then expect people just to be able to come to that truck, and that's really not accessible for everybody either. You think of people that are, you know, shut in, homebound, they can't go for whatever reason. They don't have transportation or their health. So there's a lot of people that are slipping through the cracks in the social services that are being provided, and so that was a space that we saw, you know, being able to step into. And I think what we've learned in doing that is, like, this was a problem before COVID. COVID made it a whole lot worse, and it's not going to go away when we declare COVID over.
It is true. But what made you say, hey, we have a community? How about a freaking podcast?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd been doing my podcast for several years at that point. It didn't have an audience, really. Like, I mean, it had an audience. Sorry, for those of you who've been listening since the beginning. Sorry. It had an audience. It didn't have an audience of like, I can quit my job and just do this now, obviously, right? None of us, well, a few of us have reached that level, but not many. So that little personal podcast thing was always sort of a dream thing that I wanted to do. And then when we launched the community, it was like, it just sort of naturally fit that all the things we were talking about on my personal show, a lot of them were this intersectional stuff about, you know, all these different minority communities and religion. We were talking about stuff in the news about how religion is impacting our world, and so it made sense to sort of move those topics to their own show and have a space just to talk about the church state stuff and atheism and religion. And that left Sarah Talk with not a lot to talk about. So that has sort of devolved back into a almost a personal journal. Like, I'll record a little bit here and there when I can. But it's not something that we produce regularly anymore. Also, Sarah Talk was on a weekly schedule. We were doing it every week at the same time, like really trying to, you know, get some stability behind it and grow the audience. And it just, with two kids, like, it's hard to maintain that kind of schedule. So we would find ourselves like, Friday night at 8:00, we're going to go live. All right, well, the youngest child goes to bed at 7. You have 1 hour to put down the heathen child. And she just became so difficult to get to sleep that I'm also, I came from radio, so I'm a stickler for the clock. Like, at 8:00, if the stream isn't live, I'm sweating a little bit. So even though it's dumb, like, it doesn't have to be that way. That's just sort of built into me. And so here I would be sitting like 8:15, 8:20, 8:25, like, okay, when is this damn child going to go to bed so that we can do the show? And then, you know how our shows go, 2.5, sometimes 3 hours once we get going. And it just became a lot. And so the dream had always been really to have like a collective of people that would all co-host and, you know, contribute to the show, so that none of us were having to do it every week. I would still be having to do it every week because it all processes through the studio here. So I would still have to produce it even if I'm not on air. But that would, you know, that frees up me mentally from having to prepare for a show. And we're almost to that point with Free Thought in Florida, where it's Deborah in the chat. It was Deborah and Allie Ashmead and me and Devin Graham, who's a state director with American Atheists for the state of Florida. And she is the president of the Humanists of Tallahassee. Allie Ashmead is with Foundation Beyond Belief. And so we put together this little small group of people throughout Florida that, that we can sort of pass the co-hosting baton around to and not have to burden anyone with doing it every week except me. Except me. But that the benefit of that, of course, is that it, that brings in a whole diversity of thought and background and ideas and viewpoints. And so that's been really cool, like getting to know different co-hosts and how we each like click together and gel and what our interests are and how we can bring those to the show. So it made sense to have like, okay, let's do something that's sort of Florida centric because that's where we landed on the name. We wanted to talk about shit going down in Florida, but also we talk about things that are happening nationally that are reflective or impactful to us here in Florida also.
What's it like kind of covering the Florida legislature? Is it as bad as it seems? I thought we could do like almost an evil off between Georgia and Florida.
Is Florida as bad as it seems? Yes. Yes. It's funny because those of us who live in garbage states like Florida and Georgia and Texas and Alabama and Arkansas or whatever, like we all want to claim that, no, we're the worst state. We're the shittiest state. And so there's like this perpetual battle for the bottom.
Well, what makes you, and I'm interrupting, but what makes you like want to keep fighting? Because you keep seeing these, and I mean, they're like, it's gotta be personal because they're going after not only trans people, they're going after trans kids. And I totally forgot to ask the question, like, how come you're not just like dominating women's sports instead of doing all this activism? Like, what's the deal?
I tried to play basketball in like 5th grade, and you want to talk about like awkward puberty stories of having to go to the doctor and like, oh, you have to have a cup. And like, this is all just, I'm sorry, this is not my universe. And so, yeah, sports never was a thing for me. I'm a musician. I'm a lover, not a fighter. And but to your point, like, yeah, just today. Okay, so let me rewind. There was a bill that was filed a couple of bills that was filed here in Florida that would essentially say if you're a trans girl, right, transitioning male to female, you can't play on the girls' team. In school sports, Florida High School Athletic Association, whatever, because you have an unfair advantage by nature of being born a boy. Now they were applying this to like every age of competitive sport. So like elementary school kids who haven't gone through puberty, who haven't started, who are years away from starting puberty, would also be like categorized under this. And one of the best known stories around here is Jazz Jennings, who as a young prepubescent child transitioned. She knew like at 3 years old that she didn't match the gender that she had been assigned. And so they like kicked her off the girls' soccer team because of this whole like bullshit hubbub. And we're talking about children playing a sport. Like, and I get it. I'm not a sports person. So maybe this affects my view of it, but it's just a fucking game. It's just a fucking game. Let them play ball. Like, how many of them are going to become Olympians or, NFL, NBA, whatever? Like, and even then we pay those people way too much goddamn money to do what they do, and teachers not nearly enough.
And then there's that aspect of it. And then there's like no actual, I think there was like one example they had of like a trans, like a high school student who actually quote unquote dominated, but there really hasn't been.
No.
Like there was a UFC fighter who like broke somebody, but it was like the kind of
MMA.
injury that happens all the time when people punch each other.
Yes.
It's not like unusual. It's not like, oh, you're a trans woman and you just like punch somebody's head off. If that happened, great. You know, here you go. Start your comic book.
So much of what
and then it becomes this government, like in the state of Georgia, they're like they're going to check genitalia of like, if you're a parent, you're going to be like, I don't think so.
Yep. And already,
Jesus
like
told me to do
after,
it, but still, no.
After that came up, there was already like one example of a like tomboy, whatever, child that, you know, somebody questioned whether they were cisgender or transgender.
Yeah,
and they were a cisgender kid. Like, yeah, yep. So Florida, so they filed this bill. And it seemed to have died in the Senate last week. Today, and our session is like over. We're in the final stretch here. Today, in the 11th hour, they filed an amendment to a bill about private school scholarship choice, right? A bill about school choice. They filed an amendment to basically slip this trans athlete ban back in, like at the nth hour, because that's just what this stuff is about now. Like at one point, they didn't have the votes, and then one Democratic lawmaker got up and left the room, and they were like, "Okay, go," and they voted and passed it through. Like, let's wait till so-and-so has to go use the restroom so that there's not enough people in the room to oppose it. Like dumb shit like that. Like, and what pisses me off the most, doing the work that we do, seeing humanity as we've seen it this past year, people have lost their jobs, lost their loved ones. We get messages from people regularly that are like, I don't know who else to call, but if I don't pay my rent by noon tomorrow, I'm evicted. I'm out. They're gonna kick me out of there. I'm living in a weekly rate motel or whatever, and I can't pay the bill. I can't pay it. We have so much problem taking care of just basic necessities.
Yeah.
But instead of addressing that, we're banning kids from playing sports with, like, these are what our priorities are? Really? Is this really what our priorities are? And then that feeds right back into the gerrymandering problem of like, okay, well, let's vote these people out who aren't doing the will of the actual people. Well, but you can't do that because you don't have the votes. It's frustrating.
The Republicans don't seem to care about governing anymore, but there are like super majorities in so many states.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, let's talk about Dr. Seuss and Mr. Potato Head and all these
right?
like very short term, 4 pounds of meat a year thing that came out last week. It's just, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But as we get toward the end, I can't finish the show without asking you, and feel free to punch me through the screen, about Pope Dawkins. You were the one who mentioned Pope Dawkins, and I used that term. So
Pope Dawkins don't have heroes, like, and he was never mine. I don't know. Maybe this is just in my nature, but like, I don't tend to have heroes. I don't like. I'm not one of those people that can, you know. I don't associate with like people that way. Like in the same way that like a lot of people can, you know, play the Kevin Bacon game or whatever, or like see an actor and know who they are. I don't make those connections at all. Like some people, sure, but I don't associate people that way, and I never really have. And maybe that's an ADHD spectrum thing. I don't know, but like, so the idea of like, I think this is why I'm politically where I am too. Like, I'm not an authoritarian. I don't defer to authority If the person in power is a garbage person, then they're a garbage person. If they become a garbage person, they're a garbage person. Like, I really try not to hold these people up on a. The minute you put somebody on a pedestal, they will disappoint you. They will let you down. We are all fallible human beings, and we need Jesus to fix us. But my 11-year-old got a kick out of that. but like the idea that that this is a person who's been a thought leader in our community, and therefore we give him deference forever, is a thing that just doesn't resonate with me. He said some shitty things, and he's said some shitty things for a number of years now. Like, this is not his first infraction. He's been, troublesome on a lot of issues, and we should be able to call him out for that. Now, should we go back to 1994 or whenever it was and take awards away? There's a debate I think you can have about that. At the end of the day, like, it was American Humanist Association's decision to do whatever they wanted to do. Maybe not the decision that I would have made. But like, he needs to be rebuked in public and say, like, look, you're just wrong on this one, man. And if you've taught us anything, you taught us that we need to, like, have an open mind and be willing to see new evidence and change our beliefs according to the evidence. And that's all we're asking you to do now. And if you can't do that, sorry, bro. Don't have heroes.
I think that's a good way to go. So Polk County Atheist is kind of cornering the market on Secular Week of Action. What do you have going on there?
So we look like
that's coming up pretty soon, right?
Yeah. It starts the 30th, I think. Like, kicks off a couple days from now. Our first event is on the 1st, and we are doing a billboard campaign. And there's some good history about atheist activism in this county that has to do with billboards too. But like, anytime you put up a billboard, people freak the fuck out. And our billboards, there are 3 designs. They're electronic, so they're going to be rotating. It's not an always on thing, but one says good without God, one says community without church, and fellowship without faith. And so, what we're trying to do is, like, communicate with people in the county. It's brand awareness. We're trying to find people and let them know that there's a community that they can be a part of, that we're out doing good things. And then also it helps play to the work that we're trying to do around changing, what people's perception of atheists is, that we are good people. So that, like, kicks the whole thing off. And then a lot of the events that you're seeing that make it look like we're dominating the market is, like, that's our ongoing stuff. Every week we have a team that goes out to 2 different places now, and they cook a hot meal, they pack it up, brown bag, sack them, take them out and hand them out to people who are experiencing homelessness out in the community. So we do that every week. And then there's a day where we do the backpack program, which is like packing up the groceries for the kids at a local school who are experiencing food insecurity. We take that right to the school, and the school has that where the kids can just stop by and grab a bag if their family needs food. And then we do that every week. We get together. We have a team that comes together and packs those, we buy it in bulk, right? And then they have to sort them into packages. And then every week we do the It Takes a Village food pantry. And that's a coalition thing that we do with other organizations too. But so when you look at the calendar of, like, here's all the things that we have going on, those are regular things that we do all the time. But the benefit of this Secular Week of Action is also that, like, it allows us to do this, to highlight, like, hey, these are the things that we are doing, and this is stuff that we do all the time. Like, come back next week too, because we still need help. And then the last thing is on Tuesday, I am giving a secular invocation at the Polk County Board of County Commissioners. This is a thing that I have been doing annually now. This is the second or third year, I think, where where we just go in and give a secular invocation to start the meeting off, because if we don't do it, then it's Christian prayers every time. And so I always try to choose this week, because it's like the whole thing around all of this is that the National Day of Prayer is on Thursday. And so, to counter that, we do the National Day of Reason, which Rep. Haskins just filed in Congress to try to pass a resolution to name actually have a governmentally recognized National Day of Reason in opposition to the National Day of Prayer. It won't go anywhere. It never does. I don't think we have the the votes for it. But so the idea is to sort of use this week to, again, go out there and challenge the narrative that, like, you can pray all you want, but it's not going to feed those people. We are.
Well, when you're not doing all of your volunteer work and your podcast work and everything else, what do you do to relax?
This is what I do to relax.
Talk on podcasts?
I work. Yeah. Oh, I would seriously, if I could quit my day job and just do this sort of podcast media production stuff full time, I would be there in a heartbeat. But I work a third shift job that frees me up a time to listen to a lot of podcasts. So that's generally what I do all night long is listen to various podcasts. And then I sleep all day long. So like today was my Friday. So I got off work at 8 a.m. and then I came home and I tried to sleep and tossed and turned for a few hours. And then I finally did sleep. And then I got up to do this. And then then the weekend I try to be a day person. So I spend a lot of my time like sleeping and just trying to adjust to, being either a day or a night person. It's awful. I need to get out of this job. I'll send my resume if anybody wants it.
Good luck to you. Well, where can people find you and Free Thought in Florida and Polk County Atheist and all that stuff? I'll include all links in the show notes, but please share.
Yeah. So all the things are at callmesarah.com, and that's Sarah with an H. And that's sort of a link list hub website. So you can get to Sarah Talk is sarahtalk.com. The Polk County Atheist group is polkatheists.org. You can go to Free Thought in Florida is fif.show. But if you go to, if you go to callmesarah.com, like all of those links are there. There's also information about the work that I'm doing with the Humanist Society. I'm on the board with the Humanist Society now. We endorse humanist celebrants and lay leaders and clergy in the humanism movement to like be able to marry people in a non-religious way and create new traditions and ways to sort of celebrate the milestones of life in a non-religious way. So that's another thing that I do, and you can find all of that information there.
We'll include all the notes.
Awesome.
And finish up the show. There's a Benfold, that's sort of the Benfold song, and then Benfold to the song Zach and Sarah. There we are. Even though they're both spelled differently and poorly in that song, as we all know. Thank you, Sarah, for being on the show. It was a lot of fun.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. We'll connect again, I'm sure.
Excellent.